Welcome, Section 31 Agent. It's time for the Star Trek update. And here's your host, Brian Sovryn.
Woo, baby. The Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star. The thriller that is Savzilla, ready to get into the thriller that is Star Trek. Holy shit. Has a lot been announced, has a lot gone on since we last did the Star Trek update in December of 2019. It is your December 2018, because it is your January 2019 episode of the Star Trek update. And this one's going to be fun. This is going to be a lot of fun, actually, because as you're about to hear, I was joined, very special guest. I was joined by my co-host of the Star Wars update, which is a part of the, Sovereign Tech double exclusive secret feed, whatever. That being Robin Freebeard. He joined me. He messaged me. I talk about it when we go over everything. But he messaged me. He's like, man, I can't wait to hear what you're going to say about Discovery in the Star Trek update this month in January 2019. And I said, Robin, man, why don't you come on the show? And we'll both talk about it. And we had a great conversation. We went deep. We even end up starting to talk about the occult towards the end. I mean, this is just wild stuff. And we cover so much. It was a great time having Robin on for the Star Trek update. Again, we normally do the Star Wars update together, which will also be coming out later this month in January 2019. But doing the Star Trek update with someone else, I've had, co-hosts on before for that. But, certainly Robin and I can get very, very sweaty with Star Trek, and we both have a deep passion for it. So it was so much fun to talk to him. But now I'll cut to that. But as soon as that's over, we have a ton of news to talk about, and there's actually a book review, the latest book from Star Trek Discovery, which is the one all about Tilly, The Way to the Stars, which came out I think January 2nd, something like that. We'll cover that, and then there's just a ton of news coming out of CBS specifically, as well as some news about Star Trek 4, that being not The Voyage Home, but the new movie, or maybe the not new movie. We're going to cover that. So let's go ahead. Let's cut to me and Robin. We're reviewing the first two episodes and the last short trek. So the first two episodes of season 2 of Discovery, that being Brother and New Eden. And then we get a little review in of the final short trek that came out earlier this month in 2019, January, that being The Escape Artist. That was all about Harry Mudd, and we'll talk about that. But we go all over the place. There's some wild shit that gets discussed. So check it out, and I will be right back. I will be back as soon as that's done. And we got a ton more to talk about. So, all right, let's cut to me and Rob. Woo! So a little something different here. In fact, this is something I hope to do more in the future with the Star Trek update. I am being joined by a guest. Now, this is something that I've done before. I've had guests on for the Star Trek update because everybody fucking loves Star Trek. Or no, let me correct that. Not everybody loves Star Trek, but you're for sure not going to get on my fucking show if you don't like Star Trek. That's a fact of life. So, anytime you hear some voice that's been on Sovereign Tech before, you can almost guarantee they love Star Trek. And so that's why they keep appearing, all these other guest hosts keep appearing, or co-hosts appear on the Star Trek update. And I am being joined this time. This is his first time on the Star Trek update. Of course, my co-host on the Star Wars update, which we actually have some interesting stuff coming up for that, but we'll talk about that when January 2019 Star Wars update comes out. But I am being joined by none other than Rob Freebeard. Man, welcome to the show. Woo.
Thank you for having me. This is a treat.
Hell yeah, man. No, this is going to be great. So you messaged me and you said, hey, I'm dying to hear what you're going to say about episode 1 of season 2 of Discovery, of Star Trek Discovery. And when you messaged me and you said that, I said, you know what? Why don't I just have you on and we can both talk about it?
Right on.
We can just break it down because you said, well, kind of, I guess, cart leading the horse here, whatever. But, you said you loved it.
I did.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it a lot.
Hell yeah, yeah, yeah. So now we're going to break down both episode 1 of season 2, which is Brother, and then we are going to break down episode 2, which just aired this week, which is New Eden. So we'll get into both of those since we both watched them. Actually, did you watch the short trek with Mud?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we could talk that up too. What is it? I'm trying to remember the name of it now. It's like The Escape Artist or something like that.
I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, we can break that down after the fact because I don't really feel it has any bearing on any of the 2 episodes that have occurred so far. Though I also enjoyed that quite a bit. So anyway, episode 1 of and this finally aired. We're on Thursday nights now. Yeah, actually, the title of that short trek was The Escape Artist. I was accurate on that. So we are doing Thursday nights instead of Sunday nights, which I think is largely a win. Maybe the main reason that that's happening right now is because Super Bowl, I'm going to guess, or the big game. We're not allowed to say Super Bowl, supposedly. But yeah, the big game is probably why they don't want to be on Sunday nights, because that's a great way for an exec to get their head chopped off. If you try to compete with that. So, and that's happened with shows in the past. In fact, I did a special about in fact, it was a special you inspired, Rob. That was shows that only went one season,
right?
And and I talked about Fortune Hunter, where Fox put that show on at like 7:00. It wasn't even taking on the Super Bowl; it was just taking on football. And the woman who was the head of Fox programming, Rupert Murdoch, gave her the axe, said, "See you later. You just botched this whole thing." So yeah, I mean, that's a very serious bit of business, but I think that's really the main reason why we're getting Thursday night Star Trek Discovery now.
Which is kind of funny because they continued to botch scheduling on Fox for many years after that too.
Oh yeah, they never got that shit right. I mean, it's a miracle any Fox show goes more than a season, but that's a whole other conversation that plenty of people know of, especially if you're a science fiction fan.
Just in case anybody's wondering, people know me for my Star Wars cred mostly, but I can honestly say that both Brian and I relate to Star Trek on a deeper level. Don't get me wrong, I love Star Wars,
right?
But Star Trek is was my first science fiction love. And both Brian and I, separately, have described to other people our relationship in terms of Star Trek characters.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of quotes. I could think of a few that we've bantied about between Kirk and Spock, between even Picard and Guinan. Some people might get a little chuckle out of that one, but certainly. And certainly. And yeah, we both really love Star Trek. Same for me. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up, kind of what your cred is with that. As much as I do love Star Wars, and I do, it's not Star Trek for me. And I've brought that up many times. Star Trek just it has more to it as it stands right now. In the future, that might not be so true, but it does have a lot more to it. And honestly, I want to open up asking you this before we even break down into Brother and New Eden. I mean, how do you feel about, do you think Star Trek's kind of running stronger than Star Wars right now? How do you feel about that, Rob?
Yeah, I think it's probably got a little more steam in its engine right now. I think Star Wars probably is more demographic wise, probably more popular, in terms of numbers. But yeah, I definitely think Star Trek is definitely picking up more steam, especially with the announcement of the Picard show and the Section 31 show with Giorgio.
With Michelle Yeoh in it. I mean, those are two huge names. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I feel the same way. I think Star Trek's got a lot more going for it right now. There's so many announcements, so many big, and they're bringing in so much talent, and you're not running into, and I think we'll talk about this when we talk about Star Trek Discovery Season 2, a lot of these other projects, you are not hearing the clusterfucks that we are hearing about almost every other Star Wars production that's been going on. We're not hearing about reshoots. We're not hearing about this. Not to say that Season 1 of Discovery didn't have its problems. I mean, its production team got fired. Aaron Harberts and Gretchen Berg are gone. And I think that it shows now. So it's not like it hasn't been without its trials and tribulations. There's a good one for the folks. But that,
so in the kill zone.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody declare a holy war in those little things. Oh, those poor Tribbles, which we've seen in Discovery. But anyway, yeah, I mean, not that it hasn't had them, but everything seems to be running really smoothly. And ever since Alex Kurtzman completely took over, there's just been nothing but impressive news and really great shit coming out, or at least announced from Star Trek. And Discovery Season 2, I want to say, I mean, like you said, you loved the first episode. We'll talk about New Eden. But it's off to a great start, in my opinion.
Yeah, they really came out swinging.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you had a great hook. You had a great cliffhanger, I should say, at the end of season 1, where, you see the Enterprise. It can't get any bigger than that. I mean, that's like Jesus Christ appearing. Well, we might talk about that a little later too. But I mean, that's like a second coming of Christ. If suddenly, oh yeah, wow, there's the Enterprise, which was an amazing moment last year. And that's pretty much right where the episode Brother, season 2, episode 1 of Discovery, opens right up with that. And we get introduced to the character of Pike, but we get no introduction to Spock yet. Exactly. We do get to see a child Spock throughout it, but Ethan Peck's Spock, while we do get to hear his voice, he does not make a personal appearance yet. This kind of leads me to... I guess I'll open up with my singular, like really harsh critique of season 2, episode 1 of Brother, is that I didn't get enough Enterprise. I wanted a lot more Enterprise. I mean, if you're going to end season 1 with bringing in, the big bad boy, you got to give me something more. And we didn't even get to see it in action. I thought it was ironic, actually, speaking of Trials and Tribulations, or what that's based off of, which is The Trouble with Tribbles, the classic original series episode. I thought it was hilarious that there's a point where, because the Enterprise is basically broken down. And that's why Pike, he's trying to respond to these 7 signals that they're getting from all different parts of the galaxy that they need to explore. And so he basically ends up, I mean, spoiler alerts, folks, but you already know the score. He ends up taking over the Discovery and becoming captain, more or less, of the Discovery, because the Enterprise, they don't know when it's going to get repaired. And the irony is there's a point towards the end of the episode where it's getting dragged off by a bunch of ships. And I remember a certain Klingon in Trouble with Tribbles who calls the Enterprise a garbage scow. And then Scotty says to him, would you like to rephrase that, laddie? And he says, oh yeah, I meant to say that the Enterprise should be hauled off as garbage. And there it is, getting hauled off. It was like this derelict ship. And I'm like, oh, that's funny.
And we don't even really get an explanation as what happened to it.
No,
it was just, they were on to their way to one of these signals and it just broke down. And that just seems a little too convenient.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what it also was, I mean, the funny thing about it, the explanation you get, you hear Stamets say, look, whatever happened, he said he had a friend, and there's humor in this. I mean, one of the beautiful things about Discovery is the amount of canon connections that they do all the time. But Stamets says, I have a friend who serves on board the Enterprise who's a xenobiologist, ethnobiologist, who who says, like, almost nothing could stop these things. So whatever it is, it's serious. Now, who's that ethnobiologist? We all know, or a lot of us might know who that is, which it's actually Sulu, who at the time was wearing a blue uniform. Now, the irony there is this very much smacks of, well, I guess every gay man knows every gay man in Starfleet. Because even though we never really, in the original series, you never got the idea that Sulu was gay. You certainly got that in the Kelvin timeline movies. And Stamets, of course, is gay. And so it was ironic. And in fact, I'd love it if there was some kind of like tryst between Stamets and Sulu. I'm gay. Oh, yeah. I think it's beautiful. So that might have been one of the like first hints in the Prime timeline, really, to where the idea that Sulu is gay. And so, I mean, rock on. Like, I thought that, but that was a very nice, that's such a deep cut, to really hit with those canon connections. I think both of those were really canon connections. I think they knew the joke they were making about the garbage scow too. But anyway, so yeah, already there's already so much we're talking about. I mean, so you said you loved it. What were the things particularly, again, my real only gripe was the Enterprise we're not getting action with the Enterprise. I'm sure we'll get that payoff later, but what did you love about it? Give me that, Robin.
I was already excited for season 2. just because of the casting announcement of Anson Mount playing Captain Pike.
Yeah.
And I had watched him on a previous television show called Hell on Wheels, where he was just phenomenal. And I got to say, just really, truly inspired casting choice. They couldn't have picked a better person for this role, in my opinion, because he's just like the perfect, combination of being, both level-headed, but kind of, a little bit of that recklessness.
Yeah, and you really see that towards the end of the episode too, right? Where he says, like, maybe we'll have some fun while we're doing this, ruffle a few feathers.
Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and or the point where Burnham is kind of like thinking out loud on the bridge of how they're going to get to the asteroid, and he kind of lashes out at her for like explaining the problem, and then she kind of says, "Well, if you just give me a minute, I'll explain what my solution is." And I thought that was like it's not really something that speaks well of his character, but here again it fits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we have some hint, it kind of hints at it in Brother, that, and there's going to be a book coming out. It's like the 5th in the series for Star Trek Discovery, which these books are supposed to be considered canon. Okay. The novels, the extracurricular novels, I guess you could call them. But I have some debate over that actually, because of the episode Brother, some quotes from it. But anyway, there is a book about Captain Pike and the Enterprise coming out, I think in June or July of 2019 of this year. And in that you find out that Enterprise was away. Like during the entire Klingon War, it wasn't there. And Pike is really pissed off that he didn't get a piece of the action, that he, wasn't able to do something. He has one of the most powerful ships, if not the most powerful ship in Starfleet, and he couldn't do anything about it. And so
the Starfleet specifically told him to sit it out.
Yeah.
And I think Burnham even mentioned that, like the Enterprise would have been like the ship of last resort.
Right, exactly. Which, I mean, and there's reference in other books, actually, in Drastic Measures, which was the second book, where you find out that, like, not even like the Klingons, a lot of other species at this time don't really know about the Constitution class ships. Like they're almost like the SR-71 of Starfleet. And so it's a very secret thing. They're all in deep space. And so you rarely get to see them, and they don't want people to really know that they have these, heavy cruisers. So there's precedent for that, but it's going to be interesting to hear more of that story. But that's where Pike's seeming frustration and shortness comes from, because it's like he really wants to do something to save the universe, which is interesting in comparison, I think, to his character in The Cage from 1964, back when Jeffrey Hunter was playing him, where Jeffrey Hunter is, Pike says in that, he's like, I'm sick and tired of making orders and deciding, who lives and who dies. As to where here, he's like really wanting to make decisions, and he's wanting to make an impact. And by the time of The Cage, it sounds like, oh, no, he doesn't want to make an impact at all. He's just tired of it. So, I mean, it's a nice juxtaposition, and we'll see how that character gets to that point in The Cage. But what else you got?
So the other thing I really loved was just the pacing of this episode was damn near perfect.
Okay.
Like they had just the right amount of action interspersed with, dialogue. I mean, it flowed. It seemed to me to flow really well from one scene to the next.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, this was, and in fact, this one wasn't even directed. I'm trying to remember who exactly directed that one.
I think it was Kurtzman.
Kurtzman himself directed it?
Yeah.
You might be right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, well, great. I mean, because Jonathan Frakes actually ended up directing the second episode, New Eden, and he did great work, of course, in the first season as well, in my opinion, regardless of writing. But anyway, yeah, it was a supremely done episode. I mean, just yeah, really everything was perfect and just went off without a hitch. I was amazed, especially with, it can be very difficult. You're right. It can be very difficult to do that when you're going back in time and you're showing flashbacks, which we got plenty of those.
Right.
Childhood Spock and his relationship with Burnham and everything. It was, very, very well paced. You're right. How did you feel? Go ahead.
Especially considering the amount that happened in the episode. I mean, you had, you introduced a new captain, you had a transfer of command, you introduced this thing about these Sovryn signals throughout the galaxy, and then they find a crash ship on an asteroid heading towards a pulsar. I mean, a lot happened in this episode.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you about that. How did you feel about Tig Notaro? I mean, this is much announced that she would be in season 2. I imagine we're going to see her character more. She was the engineer aboard the Hiawatha, I think was the episode, or I mean the ship that was crashed on the asteroid there. But I mean, what did you think of her performance?
I loved her character.
Yeah.
Great. I just kind of like she's an engineer, but she was in a difficult place, so she had to be a doctor too. And,
yeah,
I love the comment. It's just like, and I can read.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It was great. Yeah, I mean, it was so hilarious, but like, and I love how she's like tapping was it the Tellarite or something that maybe or one of the species there, like its heart. She had its heart sitting outside. Oh man, that was so well done. I really hope we get more of her.
I do too.
Yeah. So that was I mean, when they announced that she was going to be a part of it, I mean, she really. Yeah, she was a very big part of that episode, working so well, I think, and having a lot more comedy. It was a very funny episode, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there was a lot of good humor in it. I mean, it was like I said, it was really balanced and everything. It's just not just the pacing, but sort of like, the humor and the action and the dialogue. It really all just kind of evened out, balanced very well.
Yeah, and they even I can't believe that this happened, because one of the early critiques of Discovery back in season 1 was Saru's ability to sense death, right? Or later we'd find out that was just kind of him being hyperbolic. Really, he just can detect danger and his threat ganglia come out. And there's a point that we're going to talk about here during the episode where, his threat ganglia comes out, and like it's a very intense moment, and a guy on the bridge looks at him and sees it coming out from the back of his head, and Saru just looks at him like, really? Like, are you surprised? And it was just so like, well, go ahead.
Another great humorous moment is when Burnham and Saru are walking to the transporter to see Pike, and she's anticipating seeing Spock, her brother, who she hasn't seen in years, and apparently we're getting this impression that they have a difficult relationship, and Saru is like, senses is you're feeling anxious, and she says, no, I'm in work mode, and he kind of like sniffs her pheromones and goes, I don't know about that.
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, and they've really been fleshing out the character of Saru, especially through these first couple episodes. Like how well he can see. There's a moment where he has to use that. In New Eden, he references that he can speak 90 languages fluently, or Federation languages fluently, and so on. And then like a lot of the smell thing, and just they've used him to great effect. Of course, he became kind of a dark horse of a character that I don't know everybody expected to fall in love with, much like Tilly. And I do want to talk about Tilly in this as well. But he's become such a big deal. I'm glad that they're really fleshing him out. But that's something as well. Before we get to the one scene, we're going to call it the mansplaining scene here, and we'll get to it. But it's interesting how much they have been so quickly developing all of these characters that we spent so little, or you don't realize it until suddenly Pike is paying attention to the entire bridge crew, just how little we knew about the bridge crew of Discovery. We didn't know much about Detmer. We didn't know much about Arium. In fact, her name was even up for debate for much of season 1, is like what her actual name was. She's kind of the robotic character. She's human, supposedly, technically, but she has, cyborg parts to her, I guess. Right. Anyway, that was a very, very nice touch and there's a point where Pike does a roll call, and so you get all of the official names of everybody on the bridge, and now you can really know the bridge crew, and you're already getting them more involved in everything that's that's happening, which expands more into New Eden. I mean, what did you think about that? I mean, didn't that seem odd to you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt like they weren't really giving enough attention to the bridge crew in the first season to begin with. I mean, I was one of the people bringing up that criticism. So, and when Pike does the roll call basically on the bridge for the first time, it's kind of like, it's the first time I realized, I was able to actually attach names to faces and going, okay, this is developing a connection. Now I can look at these people and not just see like, the cyborg lady or the lady with the funny eye, or they have names, they're people.
Right. Also, I mean, and the other thing that struck me with it is the bulk of that bridge crew's female. I mean, I mean, you have I mean, Comms is a male, which is cool. I guess a comparison to her or whatever, but you have Arium, you have Detmer, I mean, and the person who's normally on, I guess that'd be navigation. They've never even really said, like, Detmer is clearly on the helm, much like Sulu would be, but right. I don't know that, and they said her name in New Eden, and it's a longer, oh, I forget. Anyway, she's the one from a new Luddite colony that they talk about, or they talk about an Earth Luddite colony. But anyway, like, or not Orinoco, I know that's a river, but it was something along those lines. And I feel bad that I can't even remember it, but it just goes to show how they never really told us these people's names. But it is impressive how much, how many really women or females are on the bridge, which is a stark contrast to just about any show, including Voyager, which I thought was a nice touch. So Tilly, then of course we have Tilly, obviously one of the, if there's like four major characters, whoever happens to be captain, then Burnham, then Saru, Tilly rounds that out. Of course you also have Stamets. But how do you feel, Tilly and Stamets? They got some, I mean, Stamets seems to like want to retire in this, but we're still getting some great interplay between the two. I do want to ask first, though, a lot of people I've read have critiqued the character of Tilly in season 2 specifically. They say they loved her in season 1, and now they're saying in season 2 she's too Tilly, like she's too much. She's kind of over the top. How do you feel about Tilly's performance?
That's the character.
Yeah,
right. I don't understand. I mean, she's even self-aware of this fact.
Right.
So what's the problem?
Yeah, I think it's hilarious.
I do too. I love her character. I mean, Stamets makes the perfect comment that, she is going to be a great captain because she does everything out of love.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was phenomenal. And I thought that their interplay has been great so far, because they're both very quirky, crew members. And so for them to like relate to each other, I think is phenomenal.
And the little scene between her and Pike with the pinky finger.
Oh, yeah. It's like, oh God, I thought I broke a captain.
Yeah.
It was so funny. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing where Pike is like humorous and everything and kind of having a good time, as to where, when we experience him in the cage, he's serious as a heart attack. So it's really going to be interesting to see how that character evolves. And I hope we get a lot of that.
And so was Lorca. I mean, Lorca was almost emotionless.
Yeah. Which, well, I mean, we all know why that is.
Right. Exactly.
There's a whole other thing behind that, but yeah. So, but anyway, with Tilly, so you didn't see any problems with Tilly. You think she's just being Tilly and doing it great.
Absolutely. Yeah. I thought the scenes between her and Stamets were really endearing.
Yeah, they were very, very heartfelt stuff. In fact, it's amazing to me. It does feel like even more human and relatable than Enterprise was, which Enterprise was supposed to be more relatable to modern day humans, like us today, than say like 24th century humans would be. Amazingly, Discovery is doing a much better job of that, where like you can really instantly relate and feel with these characters so quickly, and that's been awesome. So. Yeah. Okay. So Tilly's doing fine. I agree with you. I don't see any issues there. How did you feel about childhood Spock? What were your thoughts on that?
That was really interesting. I'm still we always knew that Spock kind of had like a troubled relationship with his father, even in the older movies and the original television show. I mean, that was clear from the moment we met Sarek.
Right. Yeah,
but it's also kind of, having a sister adds, an adoptive sister adds a new dynamic to it. And there was something, I don't know if you caught this, really something odd that happened in the flashbacks where Burnham is recalling her childhood and meeting Spock. Mm-hmm. You have that scene where she's in her quarter and she's recollecting her mother reading to her Alice in Wonderland. And Spock walks in at the end of the memory and he smiles at her.
Yeah.
But then we see that same memory at the very end of the episode and he doesn't smile at her.
Huh.
So which memory is true?
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I know exactly what you're saying. I think I just thought maybe it was a different moment in the memory, but you might be onto something there.
It seemed like the same moment.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Now, how do you let me ask you that? I mean, yeah, it was a very weird thing. Like the fact that like Spock was very artistic and all that is interesting. Well, it would have been great if we ever saw anything like that.
Great note about that too, about his art pad.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he still has it in his quarters and he still uses it. So
Yeah.
even in the 23rd century, you don't just throw away good tech just because it's old.
Ooh, yes. Wow, great catch. Yeah, hell yeah. In fact, no, right on. Yeah, because I think Star Trek at times actually said the opposite pretty sadly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, not always. There were points where they seemed to want to recycle starships and everything, and like I remember in Deep Space Nine, where the big Dominion battle that would go down, you'd have ships that were like made of part Excelsior class ships, part Intrepid class ships, and they're all mishmashed together. But yeah, in general, yeah, no, that's a great point to bring up. Yeah, that you just hold on to great tech and it's made to last. I like that. How about Sarek? Did James Frain seem to be acting a little different? I mean, Sarek seemed to have, in fact, it's funny because I was rewatching Battle of the Binary Stars, the openers for season 1, and he was very, very he was constantly criticizing Michael for her expressing any emotion. I kind of felt like James Frain as Sarek was like expressing a lot, like for a Vulcan, he felt very emotional in this episode. What did you think about Sarek in this?
Yeah, that was, well, I mean, I think that's really kind of both her and Burnham together went through a sort of development in season 1, and I recognize, and of course, that one of the characters that got probably the most criticism in terms of the actor was probably Sarek from season 1.
I mean, I criticized him too. I
don't disagree with that, but I of course we learned through season 1 the reason why Sarek was so critical of Burnham was really because of a lot of his sort of own insecurities and misgivings about things he had done in the past.
Sure, right.
And so I think now that has been aired out, that he's not having such a sort of tense relationship with Burnham.
Nah, he's not so critical. Maybe even feels like she's kind of evolved beyond maybe where...
Or they both have, maybe he's recognizing that he doesn't have to be such an uptight asshole.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, now that kind of leads into I guess it's not really a critique I have, but this is something where I'm a little worried. Like the first Star Trek novelization that was, or Star Trek Discovery novelization that came out just before season 1 premiered was Desperate Hours by David Mack, and I thought it was an amazing book. In that, Burnham and Spock do they interact. And I'm a little worried that her saying and Sarek, both of them saying, "Oh, we haven't talked to him in years" or something. Granted, that book took place years previous because it's back when Captain Georgiou is still alive, and she and actually in this book, Burnham isn't even first officer yet. So that's how early it is in her career aboard the Shenzhou. So maybe they could still be referencing that, okay, well, this was years ago, because it would be maybe 4 or so years previous. Right. But I was a little worried about that because I've really appreciated that the writer's room at Discovery and everybody at IDW and Simon & Schuster say that they're, at the very least, they're trying to stay out of each other's way, but they are more or less working together. And Kirsten Beyer being on the writing team, I think is just a total win, which she's a major author, or was a major author under Simon & Schuster with a lot of the relaunched Star Trek novels. So for them to be doing a better job, I think, in many ways of the, I guess, extracurricular content or expanded content outside of the Discovery show itself. I mean, it's been so well done. I wouldn't want them to ruin that canon status that they've been giving it. So I'm a little worried that that's going to happen, but that's all. It's not really a critique. I'm just hoping that maybe there's some explanation of that. In fact, I want to reread that book to see if Burnham... Go ahead.
There does seem to be a missing link there because, basically both Spock and Burnham made the comment that they did not expect to see Spock ever again.
Oh, yeah.
The relationship was so deteriorated that
Yeah.
You know,
Fuck.
we know that Burnham has this sort of like this secret about her relationship with Spock, and she's not ready to talk to Sarek about it.
Yeah,
But we also hear it from Sarek as well. So, you know, like here again, we know that Spock and Sarek haven't always had the best relationship. So it's not really surprising to hear that from him, but to hear it from Burnham as well, they're definitely, you know, kind of leading into building something up here.
Yeah.
Something happens.
Yeah, well, it'll be curious to see what it is. I thought the David Mack book was so great. I just don't want to, I'd hate for there to be a contradiction, but if there is, you know, what do we do?
Yeah.
Anyway, so why don't we talk about the mansplaining scene? Want to get into that?
Sure.
So, because this is one, I do have a little bit of a critique with this. So what ends up happening is they want to get access to this,
Asteroid?
Yeah, they're trying to get to this asteroid because they're looking for these signals, and that's not even getting to the whole Red Angel aspect of this stuff. But they use these like spinny, not really shuttlecraft pods. Yeah, great. That they say was for another mission that they used, and they conveniently had them there. Now, it'd be fine if those pods were just like sitting in the shuttle bay, you know, and just like off to the side, and they launch them out. But no, these things are like the entire floor of the shuttle bay, you know, caves down, and they have like whole launch decks and everything. And it seemed awful. Like it was, I get it. I know why they had them there, but it was way too convenient, and it kind of threw me. I'm like, oh, you know, like that. You should have put those elsewhere. Like they shouldn't have had their own like special part of the shuttle bay.
I'm kind of surprised, Brian. I really liked that part, just because it reminded me so much of the launch sequence from Battlestar Galactica, where they're shooting them down the tubes, and I thought they did a better job of that than even the new Battlestar Galactica. I'm sure you won't argue with me on that one.
No, I won't. Yeah, no, you know, that's true. I mean, I can appreciate that, and it's the same launch sequence they used in Buck Rogers, you know, right. And I do like that, like the turbo bay. That's the idea. I do like it. And I mean, it's easy to explain because again, you know, a point that they've never really highlighted much, even though they said it in episode 3 of season 1, is that there's like hundreds of labs and all this other shit aboard Discovery. You know, it's a very advanced science ship, and so it could have this stuff. It just seemed awfully convenient. But now, regardless of that, go ahead.
I'll tell you what did bother me a little bit is we actually got to see, kind of along the same lines, we got to see the outside of a turbo lift.
Oh yeah, we got to see the inside of it. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but every single like deck plan I've ever seen for a Starfleet ship, they're packed with decks.
Right.
And then we see the outside of this turbos lift, and there's just all this empty space. What the hell is this?
No, you're right. That's a great. I didn't even think about that. I mean, I thought about it, I was like, wow, that's okay. This is what it looks like inside a turbo shaft.
You know, I didn't think about it the first time I watched the episode, but I watched it again, and I'm like, this looks damn odd. Because all this room where these turbo lifts are flying, and granted, I thought the effect looked cool, and the animation was fine. They pulled that off just fine. It's just like it really just kind of, to me, flies in the face of what the internal structure of a starship actually looks like.
Yeah, I mean, and we've, you know, in the Next Generation, we've seen plenty times, and even in Voyager, what the inside of the turbo shafts look like. You know, not just inside like the actual lift, but inside the shafts themselves. I mean, you know, you can remember when Picard was singing Frere Jacques going up, you know, up the ladders.
Right. And they don't even have turbo lift shafts on the Discovery. They're basically on these rail systems. Yeah, it almost reminded me of you know, I don't know if you've ever seen images of what it looks like, the transport system they use in airports to deliver people's luggages to the planes and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah. No, you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a little ridiculous. You know, the more I think about it, and especially once you mentioned it, because even in Star Trek V, we saw the interior of turbo shafts. Like that doesn't make sense. I agree with you. That doesn't make any sense at all. But well, I don't know what they're doing there. That's probably Kurtzman's touch, because in the Kelvin timeline, it seems like a lot of those starships have a ton of wide open space, and there's these like, it looks like Super Mario Brothers, you know, in engineering, where you're going through tubes and everything. You're just waiting for a Goomba to come running by. And
well, I mean, like the whole engineering engineering deck in the Kelvin timeline. They filmed it inside of a literal, like factory,
Yeah, no, you're right.
It was a refinery.
Yeah.
And it almost does feel like they're utilizing a little bit, even though this is supposed to be a prime timeline show.
Yeah. Which, I mean,
that's why I accepted it in Kelvin, because like I said, the ships are bigger in the Kelvin timeline and they're different. Yeah, you do have more room in them, but with a prime ship like the Discovery, I just didn't expect to see something like that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. That is odd. Well, anyway, so we end up with these pods. But great point to bring up on that. I didn't even think about that pick. But anyway, we end up with these pods, and this is where they're going to, find Tig Notaro's character. And you get a sequence where, in fact, there's a lot of these in Star Trek now. Certainly, this also is reminiscent of the Kelvin timeline, where you have these really fast-paced, intense moments between from a ship to maybe another ship. One thinks of Khan and Kirk in Into Darkness, or even Kirk doing the leap into Vulcan, where on that platform from the Narada in Vulcan. And so it's another one of those kinds of, high speed moments and everything, which whatever, that's fine. And on this, so you have three characters. Pike is doing it, and they're all trying to get to this asteroid to see what's going on with the Starfleet ship that's crashed there, which is the USS Hiawatha. You have Pike there. You have a guy named Lieutenant Connolly, who is the science officer, apparently, who's filling in for Spock, who was filling in for Spock aboard the Enterprise. And then there's another character. I unfortunately can't remember her name at this moment, because we just got introduced to her and she was only on screen for like 5 minutes. But I think she's still aboard the Discovery right now, so I expect to see more of her. Anyway, so we get these, and Michael Burnham is there as well. And they are, Burnham is trying to tell them how to do everything. And she's saying, okay, look, the computer didn't adjust right, do it manually. And this asshat, who you very clearly gets established as being a dick very early on when he beams over from the Enterprise with Captain Pike. This Lieutenant Connolly, he's saying, oh no, you're totally wrong. I can adjust it. You're not thinking of this math and everything. And he's basically enacting the act of mansplaining, which many a feminist rightfully complains about,
and a know-it-all.
Yeah, and a know-it-all. And so, he's doing that, and it's so funny. I don't know about you. Did you know what was coming? I mean, I felt like as soon as he started mansplaining, I instantly heard it. I'm like, oh, and I knew it was going to come down. I mean, did you see it coming?
Kind of. Yeah, I wasn't. I mean, I don't know that I was surprised when it happened. I didn't necessarily see it coming. Like when it happened, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to miss him.
Yeah, so he ends up being dead wrong, and his math
literally,
obviously, way off, and literally dead wrong, because now he's dead. He's asteroid just smashes right into him, and it's some like The Verge and some other sites have made a really big deal about it, because they felt like this was Star Trek being progressive again, like it was in the 60s, which, I think that's a fair thing to bring up. And it was well done. And it was honestly funny, that he finally got it. And, just to hit that note, I think that worked. And to make, it was really kind of a very strong political statement. One could get into the fact that it was a white American guy too. And I'm sure that pissed somebody off, that ended up happening, but regardless,
I've heard quite a few people were pissed off, which I don't get, why are these people still watching Star Trek?
Yeah,
How did they even get started watching Star Trek to begin with?
Right. That's what I don't get. It's like, when was Star Trek ever like a Republican show? Like, never.
Right. Well, I've seen this before too, and it's just a weird phenomenon where like another thing I've seen was like people who were like really into the military. Mm-hmm. And they're really into the militaristic aspects of Starfleet, even though they won't acknowledge that Starfleet's mission isn't a military mission.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think that there's a certain appeal in that I think comes from like the ranking system and the military. Yeah. Like if you grew up loving Star Trek, I can see where, and sadly I can kind of speak to it. I'm not proud of it, but like if you want to get those kinds of ranks, there's only one organization that you can join, and that is whatever country you happen to be in. If you want to you end up joining the military, if you want to be called a lieutenant or a captain or something like that. And I think that does inspire some people.
Yeah. I guess I don't have that context at all in my life. So
no, understood.
Which I'm not sad about.
No, and I'm glad about it. I'm glad for you, man. But that, in fact, that's something maybe in a future Star Trek update, I'd love to talk with you about that. Because it is Starfleet. It does what I know Gene Roddenberry said over and over again. Starfleet's not a military organization. Picard is directly quoted in actually it was season 2's Peak Performance. He's directly quoted as saying, he says it to Kilrami in that. He says Starfleet is not a military organization. But at the same time, there's the episode where Moriarty, when he gets out of they think he gets out of the holodeck, where he has Starfleet security comes up to him and he says, "Oh, policeman, I recognize them in any century."
Right. Well, even Q makes that indictment in the very first episode of The Next Generation.
True. Yeah. Yeah, so it walks a weird line. I really think it walks a weird line.
Well, it's another one of those things that's great about Star Trek, and that it creates tension. It's something they certainly played up in Deep Space Nine, which I enjoyed a lot.
Yeah.
That there is definitely that conflict internally within Starfleet between the militaristic and the exploration, factions, if you will.
Right. Yeah. And certainly season 1 of Discovery tries to play up that conflict. Right. I don't think it does it very well, but it does try.
As you've mentioned before, they totally dropped the ball with the Section 31 stuff. They just they dangled that out there at the beginning of season 1 of Discovery, and then they just left it.
Yeah, I think we'll get some restitution on that. We kind of know we'll get some of that in season 2, which is great.
Right. Well, and in the Giorgio show. I'm sure.
Yeah, certainly. That's going to be a whole Section 31 show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Which I will be talking about later in the Star Trek update. I'll be getting into that. But yeah, and also, there was such a big deal about the fact that the Defiant, the NX 74205, the Defiant was the very first military ship developed by Starfleet.
Right.
So, but
it was specifically designed for one specific encounter.
True. Yes. True.
It wasn't a multi-purpose warship. It was designed for one specific enemy.
Yeah. It's meant for the Borg, and initially, and it probably falls under the same rule same regulation that Pike quoted as to why he could just take over the Discovery. So, which, hey, that's fine. It basically, I don't remember the exact what the number of it was, but I'm just calling it the Caesar rule, where we're pretty much, we got to have a Caesar at some point that saves us from the barbarians.
I almost wonder if I'm just, now that you're mentioning that, I wonder if it's part of the same part of the Starfleet Charter that legitimized the creation of Section 31.
Yeah, I wondered that too, if it was, because I forget what the exact regulation, because it's section, that's where Section 31 comes from.
Right.
Section of that article.
Exactly.
Yeah, it probably is. So, which, just extraordinary measures, which ironically, every military has that. But anyway, but it's something else I want to bring up quick with the death by mansplaining, which is so well done. He did mention, Lieutenant Connolly does mention when he's mansplaining, he does mention his Cation, or Cashian, however the hell that's said, roommate that he was also mansplaining to, which that is the race that Emrys belonged to.
Right, the cat people race.
Yeah, which I thought
they originally introduced them in the animated series. Was the first time they showed up?
Yeah, that's when they introduced Emrys. You see them, they're in Star Trek 4 as well. They're there.
Right.
Yeah,
I think they also showed up in the Next Generation timeline. I'm not sure which series though, but I seem to recall something because I looked this up as well.
Yeah, but that was a nice touch. I love I think that's such a cool little species, even though some people think they're a little too on the nose as far as sexuality goes. And
it's an interesting thing. It seems like it. I'm just thinking of this now, but in the Kelvin timeline, they're always matching humans up with kind of other exotic aliens in Starfleet Academy, because Hura had the Orion roommate,
right? Yeah, and of course, Kirk was drooping, to whatever they were.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what species, but yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, and of course, the very famous Uhura and Spock relationship, even throughout that. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was a nice touch to mention that, and to kind of drive home that maybe the animated series is a little more canon than Gene Roddenberry would have cared for. So that works for me. Anyway, yeah. So as far as anything else with the brother episode, I agree with you completely. The pacing was phenomenal. There's really, my critiques are just things I would have rather liked to have seen, not really anything with the actual presentation that we got. And this Red Angel storyline that we're ending up with, where Burnham's seeing this angel, apparently Spock is seeing this angel, and so on. It's making for a fascinating mystery, which leads us directly into the second episode, which is New Eden. This episode, I will say for me, and I want to get your overall gist in a second, for me, this felt like an original series episode, New Eden. Brother felt like a movie almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was so well done. New Eden, and I say it felt like an original series episode. I say that with absolute respect. Like, that's a positive thing to say. Everything about it, of finding like humans on a planet where they just shouldn't be, that happens so many times in the original series, and I thought that was a very cool little story. And you find out that basically there's this group of humans who end up on this planet way off in the beta quadrant where they shouldn't be. They even have to use the spore drive, and Stamets hooks himself back up when he said he couldn't, but again, extraordinary whatever events, these signals require extraordinary measures, so he breaks Starfleet code and ends up connecting himself to get them to the beta quadrant quick enough. And they find humans there, and they're humans that have been there since before there was warp drive. They've been there for hundreds of years, and you find out that they're like survivors of World War III. Another nice canon connection to something you mentioned earlier, Robin, which was anyway, the first episode of The Next Generation. Encounter at Farpoint. Where you get to see what the aftermath of what World War III was like. In Star Trek, and you get some hints of that, some of that similar look a little bit with what we saw from in New Eden, anyway, from what we saw in Encounter at Farpoint. But yeah, so this Red Angel, or this creature, delivered these humans from World War III on Earth onto this new planet. They think that the old Earth, or what they call the old Earth, is just gone, and because they're technically a pre-warp civilization, even though they're human, Pike is saying, hey, we can't, we got to follow General Order 1, which is the Prime Directive, and we got to go in there being very discreet. But yeah, this felt really, really good as far as an episode goes, and you get more of those humorous moments, and just a lot going on. We get to more of the other bridge crew, which was really cool. And there's some explanation of, kind of more, or a little bit more behind what these Red Angels are and perhaps what they can do. How did you feel about this episode overall, Robin?
I didn't like it as much as the first episode.
Right.
But I did feel that, we did have to slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it was like the first episode was like an action movie. And, I'm glad they didn't, sort of like wait to continue exploring this thing about these signals and, these Red Angel creatures. Mm-hmm. I did think it was interesting that, they quote Asimov, but they kind of changed the quote a little.
Oh, it was Clark, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Clark. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Right. That was where, Clark's third law, which is that, any significant, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But then, that twist was very Ancient Aliens, right? Where.
Yeah. And I almost felt like, Pike was trying to saying that, this was the evolution of that quote, but it almost to me feels like a step back by invoking God.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, Pike is, he's being a very interesting character in this, in that he talks about how his dad was, in his spare time studied comparative religion. Mm-hmm. And he seems to be playing up because there's times where Burnham is being very much the scientific materialist. Of course, she's raised on Vulcan, so that makes sense. And, she's saying, well, there's no God or whatever. And Pike even directly confronts her and says, well, you want to prove that? And almost like he's defending the concept of God, which is very, very weird.
Yeah.
especially since, and I mean, another weird part of this is that in season 1, there was a lot of controversy around the writer's Bible at the time, ironic name, but around the writer's Bible that said you can't mention God. Like you can't say God, like the actors can't say God. They can't do anything of that. This seems to almost stand in contrast to that in a very weird way.
Yeah. I mean, and I almost wonder if this is this like kind of like an inside baseball thing of like the changes that are going on behind the scenes of the show, or what? Is that what we're getting a hint of? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say, I mean, I kind of want to talk about this more a little later, but I mean, it is ironic. I felt that. So the original actor that played Pike was Jeffrey Hunter, who back in the 64 episode, The Cage, and in The Menagerie, which was just using footage from The Cage, but he was best known. He was a big name actor because he was in King of Kings, which was a huge movie at the time back in the, I guess that was like 62 or something like that. And he played Jesus Christ. And so for Pike to be so hot about religion and everything in this was very interesting. In fact, it got me thinking of something I always wondered, like his name is Christopher, which has Christ right in it. I don't know. I'm not sure if that was intentional back in the day or not, but it never clicked for me all these years. And I love the character of Pike, and I'm really enjoying getting more of him. Whatever.
I do. Speaking of Pike, thing we forgot to mention about episode 1. What about that fortune cookie? Did you like that?
Oh yeah, I know. Where it said something like not every cage is a prison.
Yeah, and not every loss is eternal.
Yeah, definitely a reference to The Cage. And
right.
Where, of course, in The Menagerie, he ends up going back to the cage, right? But it's actually his, I mean, it's his salvation, if you want to, or, his second chance at life, second lease at life doing so. Yeah, that fortune cookie, that was definitely intentional. I mean, and well done. Yeah, great point to bring that up. So, yeah, with this episode, that was weird. Like, I mean, just how much, it was a little too much how much Pike was defending religion, which I imagine they have a point.
And here again, it's kind of like, we're seeing some sort of, what I would as kind of describe as is not entirely positive aspect of his character, but it does make for interesting tension within the show.
True. And does give him and Burnham a very direct point of conflict. Right. As well as perhaps with his first, or, with his science officer, that being Spock, who we know is going to come in later in the season. Yeah, and I mean, and the whole episode really had an Ancient Aliens flair, where like the character of Jacob he's saying, "Oh no, I know, like my family, we were all scientists, and we led you here, and we know that the old Earth is probably actually fine, and you have starships, and you came here on that." And I mean, they're really kind of playing that up. Not that that's new. They played that up in the very first episode of Discovery from season 1. This ancient alien concept, but
not only that, you almost have like within this one family, almost like a secret society within that, culture that's keeping the memory alive of the ancient civilization they came from. And interesting enough, and I think this is really important, the fact that all of this knowledge rests beneath the church itself.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I think there's so much going on with this. There's so much being said that, like, even the idea, and this kind of speaks to sort of a theory. Well, anyway, I'm not going to get into that just yet, but the idea that like they made it all into one religion, like that, that just smacks of Prisca Theologia. Like that the idea, Prisca Theologia is an actual idea that, and talked about even by Christian commentators from centuries ago, like St. Augustine and so on, that there was an original religion that all other religions sprung out of. Right. And I have a bit of an obsession with this thing, actually, but it's called Prisca Theologia, and it just totally smacked of that. Yeah, a lot of symbolism in this. There's just a lot going on. Even, I mean, I'll tell you, even like Christopher Pike taking the phaser shot to the side. Yeah. Okay, and saves this little girl, and he takes a phaser, and they make it a point when he's in sickbay. It's like, yeah, your ribs aren't gonna like it. And I'm like, oh, that's where the Romans, speared Christ on the cross. Right. Yeah, like it was a little too much. I'm like, here, Pike almost dies, but he beams up, he goes back up into heaven. And then Jacob, he even when and it's a great moment when Pike is like telling Jacob the truth at the end of the episode. Like, I thought Pike was so cool in that, but he even says, he's like, I know what it's like to live with doubt and all that. He's pretty much calling him a doubting Thomas. like, oh, come on. Like it was almost, go ahead.
Too on the nose.
Yeah. Too on the nose.
That's basically my kind of feeling about this episode is it's just a little bit too on the nose. Like they could have been a little bit more subtle about it, I think.
Yeah, they could have. And you can pull it off because in the original series, one of my favorite episodes, you have Bread and Circuses, which I'm not going to give a full explanation about it. But at the end of it, you pretty much find out like there's this constant talk about worshiping the sun in it.
Right.
And throughout the episode, it's like this, it's a doppelganger planet of Earth, and the Roman Empire never fell. And so they're talking about this rebellion going on where people are worshiping the sun, and Kirk and Spock and everybody think it's they're pagans.
Right.
But then Uhura says at the very end.
Yep.
Right. At the end of the episode, she says, no, they're talking about the Son of God. They're talking about Jesus. And so, but the whole time you could play with the mystery and you didn't have to reveal until the end. This one, they just like were hammering you. I felt like early. Yeah. So you could do it right. That's a good point. I mean, do you have any other critiques or positives with this episode?
No, I think we covered like that. That was like here again. That's kind of my main interpretation of this episode. It's just a little bit too on the nose. I do enjoy. I hope they continue to build on this angel thing. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to that. I think I even mentioned to you in a message that it's almost kind of to me reminiscent of elements of classic Battlestar Galactica with the beings of light.
Oh, the ship of lights. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's to me there maybe they're pulling a little bit from that, but we have yet to establish whether or not these red angels are benevolent or antagonistic.
Right. They would seem to be, and based upon some of what we've seen in other trailers, they would seem to be kind of benevolent. Like they're there to save whenever they appear, they're saving someone.
But we've also seen in some of the previews where Spock says something along the lines is that there's something trying to destroy all life in the universe. Yeah,
and he describes it as a nightmare. And he's directly referencing those signals, which are assumingly or seemingly attached to the red angels.
Right. So is there another force that we have yet encountered, or is this the same one as the Red Angels?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't. Yeah, it's. I'm intrigued to see it. I'll tell you something I wouldn't mind, and maybe there's only one Red Angel. There's a classic interview from. It was on the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder, and this is in the 70s before he was on CBS, and you just had the Tom Snyder Show. Mm-hmm. And I love Tom Snyder. And there's a classic interview. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. If I think of it, I'll put it in the show notes. Where he has, this is before Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out, but Tom Snyder, it has a late night show. He has DeForest Kelley's there, Walter Koenig's there, James Doohan's there, and there's some guy that like runs Star Trek conventions there, and the late and no one greater Harlan Ellison is also there. And in that, there's a point where I think it's actually DeForest Kelley who says, I thought it'd be awesome if we had if we did a story where you find out that Jesus Christ was actually the devil or something like that, mm-hmm. And it'd be fun if they were playing up that, like, actually, like if the Red Angel thing turned out to be some kind of Luciferian, I don't know, something to do with Lucifer, and that like Lucifer might actually be the good guy, or I don't know, like it'd be cool if somebody, I loved when DeForest Kelley said that, and I'm like, wow, somebody's got to make a story like that. That's so cool. So I don't know, considering how much, and you see this even more, I think in season 2 so far, how much Discovery has been pulling from Star Trek: The Motion Picture. That interview was definitely correlative to that. It'd be interesting if they were, maybe they are pulling from some of what was said during that interview. I don't know, but
could be.
Yeah, I would be intrigued by that. Now, let me ask you, here's another mystery we ended up getting left with, is there is a character who starts interacting with Tilly, who calls her Tilly. And I think the character's name is May, and mm-hmm. she's very funny. And I mean, spoiler alerts, like it turns out it's a childhood friend that Tilly had. And so she's like, oh, wow, I can't wait to talk to her again. And then she asks the computer, hey, where is May? And eventually you find out May's been dead for years. Right. But she's seeing her in a Discovery uniform in sickbay, on the bridge, all over the place. What do you got? You got a prediction on what that is?
Has something to do with that asteroid.
With the asteroid. Okay.
Yeah, well, because she doesn't start appealing until after Tilly tries to mine a bit of the material from the asteroid, and it kind of throws her back, and she has a concussion. And that's when the first time she sees her is right after that.
That's, actually, you raised a great point. I was thinking maybe it was because at the end of season 1, a little bit of mycelia like lands on Tilly, and the camera centers on that.
Right.
And considering that Stamets can see Dr. Culver, every time, it seems seemingly every time he connects to the mycelial network, who's dead, that Tilly was somehow seeing the dead in this way. But maybe it's kind of the same thing. But what you're saying actually makes a lot of sense.
Well, I've got a wild idea.
Yeah,
we know that there's an interaction between the material that the asteroid is made up of and the mycelia on Discovery, because that was the first thing. That's why Tilly wanted a sample from it in the first place.
Right.
Because she was saying, I haven't seen this kind of activity from the mushrooms in like a really long time.
Yeah.
What if like whatever's in the asteroid and what makes up the mycelial network, they're almost like polar opposite forces acting like magnets in a way, pushing and pulling. It's because and like, the Discovery has this reaction to the asteroid when they're trying to maneuver in the asteroid field, and there's like these gravitational waves and
right,
like this didn't happen to the ship that crashed in the asteroid, obviously, because they crashed.
Yeah, right.
Whereas
right.
the asteroid is actually repelling the Discovery.
Right. Yeah. Huh.
Oh, so what if there's I don't know if this is like what they're talking about, and sort of like the force that's trying to destroy life in the universe, because the mycelia is life.
Yeah, right.
And what if whatever's in this asteroid is the opposite? And
wow, it's death.
Something, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's already been weird that episode was playing a lot with, particularly the episode New Eden was playing a lot with the afterlife, which I also think is very strange Star Trek's done it before. There was a season 1 episode of Star Trek Voyager where they did that was really interesting. But like to make it like a major plot point for so long. Wow. Yeah, that's weird. that's about all I can say about that. But your theory is, I'll take that as much as anything. Wow.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And so, like, and then, so what happens when, Stammen's boyfriend, in the mycelia meets Tilly's old best friend?
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Well, I wonder if like people are just going to come back. Like if Dr. Culver's like literally going to come back like to life. That would be very interesting.
Right.
Oh man. Yeah. I don't know where they're going with a lot of this. I really don't. But yeah, I'm open to these theories, certainly. So, I kind of want to get into an overall, or I want to, and while you're here, maybe I can just bounce it off you a bit. I mentioned, I guess this was back in October on the Star Trek update, and people did ask me. So I pretty much said, I think there's a lot of weird symbolism in Star Trek Discovery, especially that it's very occult, that doesn't that's odd for it to be there for a lot of reasons. It could be as simple as even the production art, or not the production art, but the poster for the preview poster is like Burnham with one eye, and she's holding the Vulcan symbol in between it, which even that Vulcan symbol gets it comes from a Jewish blessing, which Leonard Nimoy talks all about that. And the symbol itself, actually, it's not with one hand, it's done with two, which ends up looking exactly like the Illuminati symbol that people say Jay-Z and Beyonce and all of them make and everything. So, there's all that. But I said, I was like, well, I think there's a lot going on here that I'm very intrigued by, and people did actually want me to kind of respond to it. And the main thing that tipped me off that I feel like there's some kind of meta story going on here. Now, granted, the main showrunners are gone. Gretchen Berg and Aaron Harberts, they're gone. And I said that I felt like they were really skeevy people. Alex Kurtzman, I seem to like just fine. Anyway, so people did say, well, we'd love to hear you talk more about it. And like I said, the main thing that first tipped me off was that the two main characters of the show were named Gabriel and Michael, which are the two main archangels. They're pretty much the left hand and right hand of God. And I mean, it doesn't help that now with season 2 and including in the season 2 poster, premiere poster is, I mean, it almost looks like the Red Angel almost looks like a phoenix kind of rising from the ashes. Right. And the phoenix is a well-known Freemasonic and Egyptian symbol, even though they wouldn't exactly call it the phoenix. But regardless of that, so like that's what started me down the path, and I'm thinking about it, and there's some things where you could go a little too far with it, right? Like, I mean, you could say the Discovery looks like a pyramid with the eye on top of it, and it is a pyramidal ship, even though it was based off of an old McQuarrie artwork from the motion picture.
Right. Well, it also looks like the Idic too.
Great point. It does look like the Idic. You're absolutely right. Which, I mean, the Idic itself looks like pyramid with an eye. But regardless, like the other day I was just thinking about it and it just clicked, and I was like, oh fuck, what I kind of wondered about was there's a classic book, and I've talked about this on Sovryn Tech in the past, but there's a classic book by John Allegro from back in the 70s, and it was called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. And John Allegro's whole theory in this book is that Christianity is actually an ancient mushroom cult. And this is a tremendous book that you can read about. And like, I think it's very tough to debunk, even though I'm open to other alternative theories, kind of like Ahmed Osman's work on the Egyptian origins of Christianity and so on. But like, I started to wonder, I'm like, wait a minute, like we have Michael, we have Gabriel, we have all these aspects of Christianity kind of getting tested. And then this New Eden episode was just so over the top with Christopher, with Captain Pike and everything that he was doing. I mean, you were literally getting the death and you're getting the resurrection of Christ in this, and again, practically in the name. And then how are they getting around on all of this? What's kind of like the backbone of the story of of Discovery? It's the mycelial network, and I mean, even in New Eden, Pike says, if you're telling me we're going to travel across the universe on mushrooms, you got to be kidding me. And I was like, oh, this feels a little too. And so basically the kind of where my mind is going with a lot of this is that I sort of wonder, maybe not so much now in season 2, but I kind of wonder if just some Hollywood cult ended up taking over, because those are very real things. In fact, arguably, like some people say, William Shatner was in one and so on. But I kind of wonder if like maybe Harberts and Berg were in some kind of Hollywood cult or something, and they were putting on display their little mushroom cult. I don't know. I mean, I get it. I know that they're working off of the actual work of like Mycelium Running, the book written by the real Paul Stamets, but there's too much there for there not to be something, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. So, I mean, what do you think, Rob? Tell me. You can tell me I'm nuts. I love you.
I do not believe. I mean, I can accept that as much as anything, especially given the number of cults that are in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a breeding ground for cults, really.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know necessarily if it implies that, like the show's been taken over by cult members, but I definitely think that word about these cults certainly circulates in Hollywood more than like the mainstream is aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And writers are probably, writers are writers. They write about what they know and what they've heard.
Sure.
So they might be drawing upon some of these things that they've, read about or heard about from, their colleagues or whatnot before.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's like the best answer on it. I just like it does it. I mean, thinking about it, like it is just, I accept it. I accept the technology. I get the idea, and it's actually a cool idea. And I've read the book Mycelium Running, and I've brought it up many times. I've played TED Talks by Dr. Paul Stamets on Sovryn Tech, and I don't let just anybody do that. Or, I don't just play anybody, right. I got to respect what they're saying. And so I have respect for his work. But it is so fucking weird to like, why would you, it's a mushroom drive. And that I think a Star Trek fan 20 years ago would have just laughed his ass off saying, what are you doing? Back then. I can accept it, but it is awfully odd. And like I said, then with just a little bit of the other stuff, I don't know, it comes off weird. I mean, yeah.
Well, I have to say, I am glad that they didn't just drop that storyline completely dead.
Sure.
Because there was some worries on my part, with some of the lawsuits that they're facing so far as,
Oh, with the tardigrade and that
allegations
game
of
developer.
of plagiarism and whatnot. I was afraid that they weren't going to mention that, but they no, actually in the first episode and then the second episode, both, they mentioned the tardigrade by name.
Right.
So they're obviously not too afraid to continue, playing on that. And here again, I'm glad they haven't dropped it. I'm glad they're doing something new with it.
Sure.
Keep going. And if that involves, pulling knowledge from other players, like if imagine yourself as a writer on the show, you've just been brought on for season 2 and you know about these things. You're obviously not part of the cult, but you're aware of, the stuff.
Yeah.
Being out there, and you've talked to other people who've had personal experiences from it. I mean, of course, it stands to reason that this is say, hey, I've heard about mushrooms and mycelia before. I'll write about what I know. And
yeah, I can see. I mean, and you're right. Like, because honestly, I do that all the time, and some people pick up on it and they don't. Like that. I lace everything I do with this, like the shit that I've studied over the years. But I'm not like in any cults, and I'm really not. And nor do I have any like belief in supernaturalism of any kind. So yeah, Yeah, maybe you're on. It's just, I wonder what they're trying to say. I do think the Gabriel and Michael thing, because Brian Fuller, he had to fight for that name. Like he had to say, no, she has to be named Michael. Like, I mean, he was, it's just like Gene Roddenberry with Spock in his ears saying, no, Spock has to keep the ears. We have to keep the character of Spock. You can't get rid of it or I'm not going to do it. And it's just odd that he fought so hard for that name. It's so weird, but anyway, that's what I've got so far. So we'll see as things develop. But I do feel like there's some kind of meta story. If it's not actually a Hollywood cult, there is some kind of meta story sort of being told here, in my opinion. So anyway, you got anything else on that, Rob?
Yeah, no, I think just cool that there is a meta story.
Sure. Yeah, no, I can appreciate
it. Makes talking about it that much more interesting. And it doesn't hurt that it's stuff that you and I are both have interest in. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I do want to real quick. I want to talk a little bit about the effects, and then I think we could do a quick review of the Escape Artist. We don't have to say a whole lot on it, which was the last short trek that ended up airing, I think, on January 4th of 2019, just before, not long before season 2 of Discovery started. But the effects in the show, I want to talk about that for a second. Didn't it seem like everything was a lot cleaner, and like they got rid of that weird, because in season 1 it felt like every time we saw space it was really fuzzy or like warped in not like a warp drive way, but where everything just seemed like really like colorful and I don't know, just kind of odd, and you never got a good clean look. Yeah, surreal. You never got a good clean look at the Discovery. Did you notice a difference in the last couple episodes?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that, watching sort of like, they did the recap before they played the episode, the first episode, and they did a recap of season 1. And yeah, I was thinking that it's just like they've sort of taken out more of the the best word I can come up with is surreal quality to space.
Right. Where it looked a little more like space, like we're used to in Star Trek.
Right. And I almost wonder if that's like because they are doing this sort of like weird meta narrative with sort of this kind of like occult mystery stuff in the background, that things are just weird enough it is, and space can just be space.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe the color like red wouldn't pop enough on the more surreal look, because it was very colorful. Like space, like it looked like something out of like Barbarella from '69. It was so weird. Okay, so I'm not crazy, because like I was looking at it, and you can't trust. Like here, again, I did a review of the season 1 Blu-ray release of Discovery, and it's amazing the sharpness that show has. And because when you're streaming, you don't know what quality you're getting at any given moment. You really don't. And I mean, but it was very cloudy on the Blu-ray even then. And now I'm looking at it. Wow, it seems really sharp. Seems a lot of clarity and less colors and all that. I didn't know if I was crazy. Yeah.
I was wondering if they're pushing too much in sort of like the sort of famous Hubble imagery of different nebula and galaxies and stuff. As far as I understand it, a lot of that stuff is artificially colored by NASA.
Yeah, it is.
So, I mean, it's not a reflection of reality at all, but it makes for ooh-ah and, maybe more funding for NASA. And I wonder if they were just leaning a little bit too hard on that in the first season.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean that's something to understand. Like space is not really that colorful.
No.
I mean, like you could think of like some classic pictures that people see, like the Pillars of Creation, where it's like there's actually a bunch of nebula there, where it's like the three fingers kind of going up. Like you can see that in wildly different colors, depending upon what NASA felt like coloring it that day. So yeah, that's all rendition. Not to say that it's not like what it looks like, but just that it's a rendition.
Well, I mean, and as I understand it too, the other purpose of the coloring was, to create some sort of contrast between defining different things on the image when they're looking at it and trying to, right. So, I mean, it had a dual purpose, but here again, for Star Trek's purpose, it was just purely a looks thing. And I do think they were just kind of here again, leaning a little too much into that.
Sure. No, agreed. So, well, why don't we go ahead and get into our final short trek for now, even though Alex Kurtzman did announce that there are going to be other short treks, probably for other shows. We'll get short treks for the Picard show. We'll get short treks for the Section 31 show, I imagine, which I predicted would happen. And I thought is just a great idea because these little 15-minute episodes, have you been enjoying them so far, Robin? All four?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I still think my favorite one was the second one.
Oh, Calypso.
Calypso. That's still my favorite.
Yeah, I think we're going to get some explanation of all that come
in
season 2. Yeah.
No,
I agree with you. I think that's been my favorite so far as well with that character. The ship was called Kraft. His name was Kraft.
Right.
That was really, really cool. So the fourth one was the Escape Artist, which had to entirely do with Harry Mudd, who I thought was a breakaway character or a breakthrough character, real show stealer in season 1 of Discovery. And his episodes, I mean, Ryan Wilson's fucking amazing. Like that guy.
I was going to say, here again, another inspired casting. In fact, the casting in this show, even from season 1 on and to season 2, has been phenomenal.
Yep,
they are picking the right people to play these roles.
Yeah, all the way. I mean, even, Anthony Rapp as Paul Stamets has been fantastic. I mean, everybody's just been fantastic. Doug Jones, of course, now is an award winner. I mean, everything's fantastic. Ryan Wilson, he also directed this short trek, which was, again, called The Escape Artist. And in it, we get kind of a preview to the second episode of the original series where we last encounter Harry Mudd, again, from the original series, not Discovery, where he's on a planet where there's like a bunch of robot women and all this different stuff. So anyway, spoiler alert, like he's basically running this con where he is selling robot versions of himself off to other bounty hunters to, like he makes money off of selling, Harry Mudd to the bounty hunter. Then the bounty hunter will take him to Starfleet to hopefully get a reward. And then you find out, oh no, we've been collecting tons of Harry Mudds. It's a very funny episode. It's very well done. Ryan Wilson is, just top of his game in this. And the character of Harry Mudd is so fucking hilarious. And it really adds so much to the character we end up experiencing in the original series, I think. Now, some people were saying that this is hinting at the origin of Data. How do you feel about that, Robin?
I can understand why they feel that way. I don't necessarily agree, but I can understand why they might think that. And who knows, maybe, Dr. Soong at some point ran across Mudd's research into making his own androids. It's certainly within the realm of possibility.
Sure. I mean, I'd love to see, I'd love to have like a Soong, someone in the Soong family, or an ancestor appear, much like he did in Enterprise,
right?
Appear in Discovery. I'd be
right.
totally.
And I was going to say, it's not like we haven't seen, members of the Soong family do shady things before.
What? Yeah, well said. It takes a while before we get to the very ethical Dr. Soong that we encounter in the Next Generation. Even he, fucked up before.
Right. But at least he had the sense to deactivate him.
Right. Yeah. So, I agree with you. Maybe maybe that this is going to be, maybe that'd be something, and that'd be a fun connection between Discovery, the original series, and the Next Generation, and Enterprise, really, because at the end of Soong's appearance in Enterprise, or the Soong member at that point, he says, cybernetics, that's where it's really at, not
right.
modifying humans. I think that would be, that'd be really cool. But overall, I mean, you enjoyed this episode.
Oh yeah, it was definitely the comic relief episode, which was great. I loved it.
Yeah, I agree. And that was much needed because, let me ask you, how'd you feel about the Saru episode? I thought that was a little.
Yeah, that was the weak link, and I think in the chain there of the short trek so far. Although it seems like it's probably going to have the most impact on
in
so far
2.
as advanced season 2. Yeah,
because he does mention his sister.
Right. Well, and I could swear that in one of the preview after the second episode, or might have been the first episode, we see another member of Saru's species with him.
Yeah, and there's and there's some references too, I think, to like there's a flower bed and there's some other things that are like references to his planet. That's a good point. This was needed. Like it needed to be a really great short track, and it needed to be like leaving you with some kind of emotion, because I really felt that the Saru episode was, it was good, but it was just kind of matter of fact and bland. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And so for this to leave you with a good chuckle, and for us to remember that Harry Mudd's still out there, I think was absolutely necessary, and I hope to see him more in season 2, obviously.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, anything else you want to add in? Any predictions? Anything? I mean, how you're feeling? Season 2, I think, is looking great. It sounds like you're saying the same. Yeah,
absolutely. I said even before the season started, I was really looking forward to it, and everything I've seen so far seems to. I feel I was justified in that, anticipation, and I've made my wild theory as to maybe what's going on with sort of the possible opposing forces and between the mycelial network and whatever this asteroid is made up, or this red angel. So we'll see if I'm right. I don't know.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Again, I'm very pleased with the direction. It does feel like the show is really finding its footing very quickly. Bringing in a character like Captain Pike is a great way to do that, of course. People forget, like, I think Captain Pike was a show stealer in the Kelvin Timeline movies. Bruce Greenwood was awesome as Captain Pike in those films. It's a great character because it's a character that we know has history. And so to bring it in, I love it.
And this really kind of, to me, in a way, sets precedence for Star Trek, because it took almost all the other Star Trek show, except for the original series, more than a season to find its footing. And to find its place within the Star Trek universe. Yeah. And they seem to be doing that fairly well now with the beginning of the second season.
Yeah, they're hitting stride very quickly.
Yeah. Whereas it took, with Next Generation, it took like a good 2 or 3 years, and same thing with Deep Space Nine. And, I think to a certain degree, Enterprise kind of, had its ups and downs in its first season.
Yeah,
and its second season, but it definitely didn't find its footing this quickly.
No, I would argue Enterprise didn't hit it till the fourth.
I'd agree. Yeah. There are things that I do love about the first season. Yep. That weren't in the fourth, but I would agree with that assessment.
Yeah. I've said that I think Discovery has the strongest first season of any Star Trek show, minus the original series, because then the original series was, trailblazing every episode.
Exactly.
So, I agree with you. And it is impressive to actually, for it to like correct course, even if season 1 was the best season 1 of any Star Trek show, for it to correct course so quickly, and it really has, I think, in 2 episodes, is impressive, for them to pull that off. Because Next Gen, it did take 3 years.
Deep Space Nine, it took till they got the Defiant.
Yeah, right. Which ended up, I think that was like third season.
Yeah,
or so.
Third season. Yeah,
right. In fact, some people feel like really Deep Space Nine didn't really hit it until Worf came on, which that was the 4th season, Way of the Warrior. Yeah. I like the 3rd season a lot, but
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah, so things are feeling good in Star Trek land. I'm very happy of everything that's been announced, and there's going to be a lot more news getting covered in this episode of the Star Trek update, and we'll be hitting that. But for now, I think we'll end with that high note. And Rob, man, we're going to do this again. You're going to be on the Star Trek update again, no doubt.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
I
love talking about Star Trek just as much, if not more, than I love talking about Star Wars.
Hell yeah, and it feels like there's so much more to talk about.
There is. I mean, well, it's Star Trek. There's always more to talk about.
Hell yes. Yeah. So everything's we're off to a really great start, and I love it. So anyway, all right, Rob, thanks so much, man. And I'll be right back with we got a lot more news to get into. I'll be right back. How about that hotness, huh? Can you get enough of that? Oh man, always so fun to do stuff with Rob. I mean, just a true brother, no doubt. So anyway, we have a lot of other things to talk about for this month's Star Trek update. But again, as I said, I'm very excited. Don't confuse, if I have anything negative to say in what the rest of what we're going to talk about, don't think that that's speaking to my feelings of Star Trek overall, because like Rob and I were just saying, I feel much better about Star Trek than I do about Star Wars right now. And I mean, and there's so much more going on, and really the direction that Star Trek Discovery is going in, and a lot of the news that we will talk about is honestly just straight up fucking exciting. I mean, the Picard show alone is reason enough, but we'll talk about more. Like we briefly mentioned, Michelle Yeoh's Section 31 show that got confirmed. There's so much more though. We'll talk about it. So anyway, what I want to talk about first, though, is a book review. And now, granted, as I've said before in the Star Trek update, I generally, even though last month I did read the Prometheus trilogy, only because Big Finish did it, and it was like separate from, it was a separate book. It was by Titan Books, which is separate from Simon & Schuster. That's what made it like kind of stand out for me. But otherwise, I do, from Simon & Schuster, who's been publishing Star Trek books for decades. I do read everything that is Star Trek Discovery because, again, as I mentioned earlier, when Rob and I were talking, that stuff's supposed to be canon, so it's worthwhile for me to read. Not that I don't enjoy Star Trek books anyway, especially like the Shatnerverse, the William Shatner books that he wrote, or Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens kind of ghost wrote them, but you get my point. I do love those, but the ones that I make sure that I read and that I talk about are the ones that are supposed to be canon. And that being, again, anything for Star Trek Discovery. That includes the comic books, and that really includes the novels. And it just gave me a quick thought. Why can't we get a Star Trek Discovery video game? Fuck, that'd be great. I guess I don't know exactly what would go on, but I mean, you have the Klingon War that they could have been fighting, and it'd be interesting to have some interaction with Captain Lorca again and all that. That would be pretty cool. But something that wasn't pretty cool, anyway, my wishes aside, something that wasn't cool was this latest book for Star Trek Discovery, this latest novel. Though calling it a novel, that is kind of stretching the word in my opinion, or kind of stretching the term in my opinion. It's The Way to the Stars, and it's by Una McCormick, and of course I listened to the audiobook that allows me to get through the book very quickly, which I love. And the audiobook itself was also was read by a female voice artist, which I thought was great. It was a great thing to have, considering that this entire book is about Ensign Sylvia Tilly. Here's the problem with this book, okay? Not that there's anything, Una McCormick, she can obviously write and write very well. There's no problem as far as that goes. There's nothing technically wrong with this book. But what the real issue with this book is that, in fact, the only way I can compare it is if you listen to the Star Wars update. I think it was maybe last December's Star Wars update, way back. Okay, we talked about, because this was just before The Last Jedi came out, there was a book that was released called Canto Bight, which had to do with that bullshit scene that ended up being in The Last Jedi. And my review of that, and I think I was talking with Rob at that point. Boy, has he been doing the Star Wars update with me for a year now? I think he has. That's amazing. Anyway, I think. But anyway, so this book, Canto Bight, here was the thing. It was a book. It had it was not really a novel itself. It had 4 different stories in it that comprised what, would chalk up more to a novel size. And my critique of the book was that there was nothing about it that was really Star Wars. Like, you could have, in fact, I said at the time, they could have taken some like old Vegas novels from like the 60s and just replaced all of the things that reference Vegas or humans and just put an alien in its place, give it a funny name, and just say it's on Canto Bight instead of Vegas. And you would have ended up with the same book. There's nothing special about it at all. Like nothing. Okay. And this book, Way to the Stars, is the same way, but it's with Star Trek, where this could have basically, it's covering Tilly growing up, going to diplomatic school, which that's kind of interesting that we finally get some kind of school that actually isn't Starfleet Academy, or I guess maybe the school that Keiko O'Brien was running on Deep Space Nine, right? But we get some kind of like academy, something other than Starfleet Academy, that's some kind of like almost graduate school or something like that. That was kind of nice, just to get that like little glimpse. And there's a couple other little things that I'm going to talk about as far as that goes. But you get that, and Tilly's pretty much a teenager throughout the thing, and like she's getting communiques from her dad, who is some kind of archaeologist, and he's way out in space or something like that. So it's tough to have communication with him. She has problems with her mother. Her grandparents are really sweet to her, and all this. I mean, the point I'm just going to break it down to is it read like a Babysitter's Club novel. Or like book. I mean, it just any fucking like young adult, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these kinds of books, but to appeal to, I don't know, I guess teenage, high school gals. It could have been any book. All of it could have taken place on Earth. There's no reason that her dad had to be a part of Starfleet for the book to make sense. I mean, they could have lifted, again, just some like just some adventure on Earth in present day, some adventure novel for teenage gals, and just slapped on a bunch of Star Trek names in it, and there's a token Vulcan here, and there's this. I mean, there's nothing about this that felt like Star Trek or that needed to be Star Trek. And I feel like this is real laziness. And I'm not just saying Star Trek is doing this. Obviously, Star Wars so far has been the most egregious as far as that goes. I mean, hell, in The Last Jedi itself, the entire Canto Bight scene didn't feel like Star Wars, or didn't need to be Star Wars at all. So, yeah, I was really annoyed by that. And I got through it. I did it for you. I sacrificed my time for you, the listeners. But it was just terrible. I mean, it wasn't like bad for what, again, technically there's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing Star Trek about it. And you could just really feel like Una McCormick, I don't know what the hell else she's written, but I mean, she probably writes, I don't know, maybe she writes babysitter novel or Babysitter's Club novels, or whatever the fucking teen series are out there now that are popular to take place in the modern day. There's just nothing Star Trek about it. And there's really little point in talking about anything else in the book because there's nothing, like, it doesn't really add to the universe. In fact, I thought Tilly seems like very resourceful, and she doesn't seem to have like that nervousness or anything, which maybe that's something that develops in her later on, but she seemed to say, like, I got the hint in Discovery that she said she was always this way. She was always very nervous and all these other things, but she walks around very confident and everything. Like, it didn't feel like Tilly at all in the book. So even that was disappointing. Like, I wouldn't be surprised, literally, if they just lifted from some other teenage modern day gal series and just, again, slapped down a bunch of Star Trek names onto this. It is an absolute waste of time. There's not even, like, an interesting thing that has happened with the 3 previous books that have come out for Discovery is the bulk of them, well, maybe Fear itself with Saru didn't have it, but I think it did. But the bulk of them had some kind of epilogue, okay, where Drastic Measures specifically did, and you pretty much find out that Lorca, or Prime Lorca, is probably still alive in the mirror universe. Okay. But that's a whole other thing. But you didn't even get that epilogue. I mean, you got nothing that really gave you any addition to some kind of hint as to what's going on as far as with Discovery. You got nothing that really added to the Star Trek universe. The only thing that was kind of interesting, well, there's a couple things. One is that there are a lot of quotes, talking about this diplomatic academy that she was going to. They made it very clear in certain conversations, like with Tilly with her dad, that apparently kids don't have to go to school in the 23rd century. which, hey, great. I'm not arguing against that, but I mean, that seemed to be what they were suggesting with it. The other part, in fact, this comes from a conversation with her dad. Her dad made a comment that to save Tilly's life, he would commit mutiny against Starfleet. That one little line maybe gives you a little something as far as a reference to Discovery, right? Because that maybe makes a little more sense why Tilly was still so friendly with Michael Burnham, who was the first mutineer in Starfleet history, because her dad was willing to commit mutiny. Like he said that was like a viable option. And you definitely get the hint that Tilly really cares and respects her dad more than she does her mother, which I guess you could say some of what happens in this book makes the first short trek that we got with Tilly, Runaways, that it helps give you some understanding of her annoyance with her mother at the very beginning of that short trek. But fuck, I mean, the fortunate thing is that, again, I listen to these as audiobooks. I listen to them, especially a Star Trek audiobook. I listen to that at like 2.5x. And I can do that because like I know the universe. Okay. Like I don't have to click all the details, even though I'm listening for them. If I had to like actually sit down and read this 300-page bit of nonsense, like long form, like sit down and read it, I would have been, I might have tossed my Kindle. I mean, I would have been so pissed off. I'd be like, wow, this is bullshit, and I still paid for it too, and I'm really, really disappointed by this. I think it's crap. I've been reading other reviews on other sites and everybody's like, oh, it's so interesting to learn all this about Tilly. And I'm like, are none of you other fucks seeing that this book could have been anything? There's nothing about it that's Star Trek. There's nothing about it, in my opinion, that's really even Tilly. What, a sentence? Like that her dad says? Bullshit. I don't feel like I know the character that much better. I mean, there's no doubt that their point for this book was they wanted you to get to know Tilly better because she's a breakout character. Everybody's nuts about her, and rightfully so. I think she's a great character, but this did nothing for it. Like, if anything, this harmed my view of Tilly, because it felt like such a very simple cash grab. And it might have been, again, I really wouldn't be surprised if they literally, this might be a dirty game that's going on, where like a lot of these franchises are just taking stories from other books and just ripping them whole cloth and just replacing it with their characters. Because, I mean, yes, in life, genuinely, everything's a remix. Nothing new under the sun. I understand that. Okay. But really, like, they didn't expect, I don't think CBS expected Tilly or Saru to be these big of characters. But they realized what they did and they tried to capitalize on it. And that's why the last two books have been Saru and Tilly. But I think the Tilly one they wrote really, really fast. And it was the shortest of the bunch, I think. Yeah, just disappointing. If you want, I think the first couple books are required reading, to understand Discovery and that time frame in Starfleet's history. Both Desperate Hours by David Mack and Drastic Measures by Dayton Ward. Both of those are so important to read. I mean, Fear Itself, the Saru book, was okay. I mean, you can hear my review of that in previous Star Trek updates. But those two you got to read. But I've been very disappointed with the last two. I think we're going to get a fifth book in, I think, June or July of this year of 2019. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking with Robin. And that's going to be about Captain Pike and a bit more about the Enterprise, I hope. So that should be very interesting. And I hope that, that picks up where the first couple Star Trek Discovery books left off. And maybe because of the amount of time being taken before it gets released, obviously this is also so that season 2 of Discovery can be done and come out. And maybe there'll be some reveal in that book as far as like explaining a cliffhanger or some kind of cliffhanger within season 2 of Discovery. I have a lot of hope for this book. So hopefully it will cure the ails of the last two Star Trek Discovery books, even though the Fear Itself, Saru's book was okay, but that's the thing, it was just okay. It wasn't where like Desperate Hours was amazing. Drastic Measures, Kirk was fucking in it, and we even got we got Captain April at the end, which was dynamite. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that the fifth book picks back up on adding to the Star Trek universe again in a really beautiful way. So, all right, we can move on from that, though. I was just disappointed. Don't bother reading it. I saved you the trouble. let's start talking up some other stuff. This is, and something Robin and I were talking about, which is Alex Kurtzman came out and did some discussing. He's been really making the rounds at various conventions and other things, talking about what's going on with Star Trek overall, because Alex Kurtzman, we now know, he is the Big Daddy. He is the Rick Berman or Gene Roddenberry of CBS's modern plans for Star Trek, which... I have a lot of trust in the guy, and I think he did great work with the Kelvin timeline. I'm not one of those Star Trek fans that hates the Kelvin timeline. I actually like it a lot. I'm a big fan of some of the stuff that was done in that. But anyway, Alex Kurtzman really took over from when Brian Fuller left. It's sort of what left me with some confidence about the show. And Kurtzman seems to have realized that he really needed to step in, and somebody that has real respect for Star Trek, which him saying that alone sort of hints at what I've been saying for a few months now, that just that negative feeling and that weird skeezy vibe that I got from Aaron Harberts and Gretchen Berg, who were running Discovery throughout season 1. Of course, they ended up getting fired, and we found out that they were like either verbally or physically assaulting the writers team. I mean, it's just insane what was going on there. Anyway, I'm going to read a little bit of the story from TrekCore here. And let's do it. Star Trek executive Alex Kurtzman continues to make news today as a new interview reveals his reaction and reasoning for stepping in as showrunner on Star Trek Discovery after a number of tumultuous shakeups impacted the series in 2017 and 2018. Speaking today with The Hollywood Reporter, Kurtzman for the first time talked publicly about the departure of fired showrunners Aaron Harberts and Gretchen J. Berg, who were removed from the series in June 2018 after reports of verbal abuse and human resources complaints caused CBS to make a change at the series. After the departure of Brian Fuller, the Discovery creator, who was also fired from the show in 2017, Kurtzman decided he needed to step in personally, even though he hadn't planned on it. Quote, Gretchen and Aaron were put in a tough spot because we were inches from production when we lost a showrunner, that being Brian Fuller. They were there to pick up the pieces. When the writers weren't happy, I couldn't hand the show off to someone else again. I couldn't stay at 30,000 feet. It was my responsibility to get into that room and make sure the show was working. I created it, and I didn't want to stand back and be removed from that process. I wasn't planning on showrunning Discovery. It was difficult. End quote. While Kurtzman is the main man for Discovery moving forward, he remains a franchise facilitator for the expanding Trek universe, which includes so far the upcoming Captain Picard series, the animated Star Trek Lower Decks, along with other rumored projects still unannounced by CBS. He also addressed how he views the ongoing Trek development slate and limits the franchise may have on expanding too far. So here's the question. What was the mandate for Trek when you signed your overall CBS deal? Kurtzman says, I came to CBS and said, let's open this world up and see what else there is and make sure that each show has its own identity. My job is to run Discovery and, in the case of other shows, remain at 30,000 feet so I can weigh in meaningfully and significantly at all the critical junctures of the development. Next question, is there a cap on how many Star Trek shows is too many? Kurtzman says, there has to be. At a certain point, people are going to say it all feels so similar. The only thing I'd throw back is that nobody seems to have said that about Marvel. Between film and TV, no one is tired of them. That means that in a world of a global audience, there's always room for more, but that more has to be meaningful. I'm going to disagree with Kurtzman on that. No, people are burned out on comic book movies, and they are burned out on Marvel, and they do call bullshit on Marvel for the movies being too safe, and it's like it just doesn't. They don't seem to work, even though it does appear they can still make a good movie here and there, Black Panther and so on. But yeah, no, people do complain about Marvel that there's too much. I don't know that there can be too much Star Trek, and if it does all feel the same, that's okay, because when we had, TNG, DS9 running together, then we had DS9 and Voyager running together, those felt very much the same, especially stylistically and so on. I had no complaints about that. Oh, I get to just spend more time in the 24th century? Okay. You're pretty much saying it's like, yeah, people are going to think it's too familiar to spend all that time in the future. What? Why not? Let's do this. Anyway, so there's a little bit more. I'll leave a link in the show notes for that. But basically, he's saying I have to step in, and he's kind of making concessions, it feels like, for Berg and Harberts, saying that they had to, they really had to, I don't know, pick up the pieces of what Brian Fuller left behind, but something's not exactly right about that either. But he knows he had to be in there, and he had to be making sure that this thing was flying right. I mean, this is clearly the flagship show, even though I'm sure the Picard series is going to go above and beyond. But we don't even know how long that's going to end up going. And there was a bit of a flub where what's her name? Heather Caden. They were talking to her as well. She's kind of like running things with Alex Kurtzman. She's kind of a new into the game. I hadn't seen her name before, but she accidentally said, when she was referencing the Section 31 show, she had accidentally said there's going to be a season 3 for Discovery, and she said it like it's a matter of fact. And even like another interviewer at this red carpet event or whatever, I think it was the premiere for like the big Hollywood premiere for Brother for episode 1 of season 2. And like a guy said, it's like, wait, did you say Discovery season 3? She said, yeah, season 3. And so it seems very clear that, okay, no, CBS has already penned it down. There's going to be a season 3 of Discovery. I can believe it because, there's already the confidence showing of where actually Anson Mount, who plays Captain Pike, he said at a convention in New York that they added in, was it 1 or 2 episodes into this season, into season 2? I mean, if you're willing to, put in some more money on that, yeah, you're probably feeling really good about things, and you're going to go into season 3. So I think that's dynamite. Great. Let's do that. So anyway, I like I said, like Robin and I were saying, I feel good about season 2. Alex Kurtzman bringing in his personal touch, I think, is definitely helping things out. Very bright guy, no doubt. So anyway, speaking of the next show that's supposed to come on the way, well, first off, and that was in the last story that I was reading from, actually, there was also the announcement that there's going to be another animated series, not just Star Trek Lower Decks. Star Trek Lower Decks is going to be kind of a comedy show. I don't know how I feel about that. I'll watch it, whatever. It's Star Trek. Maybe it'll end up being good. I mean, that can happen. But there is going to be another animated show, but we don't really have a whole ton of details on what that's going to look like. But I think that doing animated shows is a great way to get a lot more Star Trek out there a lot faster. And if you do it with a really great animation style, similar to, say, Voltron Legendary Defender or even Castlevania, and you let it play it up at that adult or multi-demographic level, I think you're going to have a winner on your hands. And you're going to have something that's bigger than, look, Star Wars has been propelled for a decade on CGI animation, but on animated shows. And in fact, they're damn good. Rebels is great, or was great, and Clone Wars is fucking awesome once you get into the later seasons. Why not Star Trek? Do it. I think that it's awesome, and make them, they don't have to be comedies. People can take animation seriously today. They really can. Voltron and Castlevania are 2 great examples of that. So anyway, we are going to get another animated series. I think that's awesome. Not sure when exactly that's going to drop. That could be probably in 2020. I think we're supposed to get Lower Decks this year. And we're still on target for the Picard show to come out end of 2019. Though Kurtzman did seem to say it might end up coming out beginning of 2020, which, hey, maybe. So now there was an interesting bit of news that Alex Kurtzman also dropped another quote-unquote bomb, that being, or maybe the explosion of a star, that being that the Picard series is going to be influenced by what happened in the 2009 J.J. Abrams directed Star Trek film, which, of course, Alex Kurtzman was a major part of. That being where the planet Romulus is destroyed. And I think this is fine. Like, this is really cool if they want to keep playing off of that and to give legitimacy to the Kelvin Timeline films. In fact, right here, Kurtzman says, Picard's life was radically altered by the dissolution of the Romulan Empire, end quote. So that's perfectly clear. And there's more quotes that go on with it where he talks about the fact that, and they went over like a 34-page document with Patrick Stewart, and Patrick Stewart said, look, this has to be something different. I don't want to do The Next Generation again. I want this to be something special that I'm coming back into. And Patrick Stewart was all for it. And part of that was Picard dealing with the aftermath of destruction, of the Romulan homeworld, of Romulus, that happened in, that we see happen in the 2009 Star Trek film. What was that? Was that 2272 when that occurred? I think that's the date. So, which we knew that it was going to take place after that. We knew it'd be 20 years in the future from the next generation. So we talked about that previously, but it's directly, there is going to be some kind of connection with what happened, to Romulus and the fact that it's gone. I think that's awesome. I'm totally up for that. In fact, I mean, the way to save that, if you read the prequel comic book for the 2009 Star Trek film, which was that Countdown? I think that was Countdown was the title of it. But the squid-like ship that Spock, Leonard Nimoy, of course, and then later on Zachary Quinto's Spock ends up flying, that was developed by Geordi LaForge. So maybe that's a hint that we're going to get Geordi. We're going to get LeVar Burton in the Picard show. That would be awesome. So, and aside from that, Kurtzman did say, as I mentioned earlier, that in spring of 2019, so just a few months away, but we are going to get more short treks. He didn't exactly say what they would be about, but that would be right after pretty much season 2 of Discovery, I think, would finish airing. So that's a win. And hopefully this time around they do more than 4 of them. I mean, we could take as many as they want, and it's nice to just constantly get that little reminder, oh, no, there's more Star Trek coming, and so on. So again, we don't know what those are going to be, but I would love it if they expanded beyond Discovery, and it seems to be clear that they're going to, which again, I predicted that they would end up doing that anyway. So now maybe the biggest news outside of the Picard show, as far as new content coming for Star Trek, is Michelle Yeoh getting her own TV series. They did sign that deal. I cannot imagine that was cheap because Michelle Yeoh is a big deal again, thanks to the success of the film, what is it, Crazy Rich Asians or whatever the name of that movie is. Anyway, at some point I'll watch it. In fact, I think there might even be a sequel getting made for that. So Michelle Yeoh, I always think that she's been phenomenal. Of course, I've enjoyed her since Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Loved her in Tomorrow Never Dies. She was a Bond girl, and she's a legit badass. She really is. She can deliver all that action on her own. She's the real deal. So to get her and give her own TV show, that's an absolute coup. That is a huge announcement, like Robin and I were saying. So, yeah, she's going to be getting a Section 31 show. How do I feel about this? Well, first off, granted, Alex Kurtzman, genius that he was, he dallianced with Section 31 brilliantly in Star Trek Into Darkness. In fact, very well done. I love the black ship in that, the evil Enterprise, right? The Vengeance, the USS Vengeance. Anyway. In fact, I got the model right next to me here. I love this. I love that damn thing. I feel like I was way ahead of the curve. I knew that because I started writing Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers. At some point, I actually want to finish that series and do the full-on audio theater like I planned. Okay. Just a lot of things have been shaking up, all of which, eventually Sovereign Tech listeners will learn about. But anyway, with Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers, I was like, no, you know what? A Section 31 centered series would be fucking great. And we need to do that right now. And this is just vindicating for me, that they know it too. Like CBS knows it, or Alex Kurtzman knows it, that, yeah, people are ready for it. They want the Section 31. However, if you read a lot of the comments section, which is always a ridiculous thing and a waste of time to do, I think. But in general, I took a bit of the time. If you read the comments section on a lot of the stories that reported this, that, that there's going to be a Section 31 show starring Michelle Yeoh, a lot of people are like, oh, this is terrible. It's the same shit. Somehow, they're people are saying, oh, Starfleet has to do this. Same arguments that were given against Discovery. This doesn't feel like Starfleet, blah, blah. Well, it's not Starfleet. It's Section 31. But they're more or less saying we don't want Space Hitler. They were pretty much calling the character of Empress Georgiou, not Captain Georgiou, but Michelle Yeoh's character, Empress Georgiou, the Mirror Universe version of her, is that she's like Space Hitler. Now, I don't know that's totally unfair, but come on, to argue that oh, we shouldn't do this show because you think it's going to somehow venerate evil. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to end up getting a character that probably changes over time and realizes, oh, the Federation's actually important, blah, blah, blah. I think it would just be so interesting to have a different fucking take. And while I don't need a show where the heroes are the centerpiece, where the heroes are like the most important characters, there does need to be a show where there are heroes within it. Like, you don't want it to be like Bastard Star Galactica, that new shit where you had like no heroes whatsoever. Like, there was just no good guys. I mean, it's fine to have a show that concentrates on the bad guy or the bad gal, but you have to have a foil for that bad gal. You have to have a hero for them to play off of. That's why Battlestar Galactica, the Ron Moore's version, was so terrible, because there were no heroes to play off of. Okay, or if there were, the heroes just like would die almost instantly. It was so terrible. So I think there will be plenty of heroes in this series that Georgiou can bounce off of, because she's a far more extreme character. And I think it could be a lot of fun. And it'd be great to see, when's the last time we had a really great villain run show? Pinky and the Brain? Seriously. I know you're laughing. I'm not kidding. Like, that was every time somebody tells me, because this is another critique that was made against the Section 31 show, was that, you can't do a show that's all about the villains, or you can't do, and that's not true. You can watch Payback, or you can't do a movie that's like where the villain is the main character or something. Mel Gibson's Payback is an awesome movie. Granted, yes, it's usually an evil guy going after eviler people, but at the same time, like, I completely disagree, because you can watch Pinky and the Brain, and that's like one of the best cartoons fucking ever. Originally, it's so good. It was originally just a part of, it's just a part of Animaniacs, right? And then it ended up getting its own show. Pinky and the Brain worked, and it was totally a show about the villain. Every fucking episode was about the villain, and it was great. So, I know that's a lot different than Star Trek, but still the concept's the same. Yes, you can have a villain-run show, and I would love for that to be the case with Section 31. I think that's going to be a dynamite series, but also I want to give myself some fucking credit. I'm ahead of as always, I'm the Golden Stallion. I'm ahead of the game. I'm the man of tomorrow, and it's today, because we're going to get a Section 31 show that I said that I was way ahead of that. Anyway, yeah, so the other thing is, though, they pretty much said that this show might not air until like 2021, because they said it might not come out until after the Picard show's even done. That's my only concern with that. Not that Michelle Yeoh's that old, but when you're dealing with older cast members, and it can happen with younger cast members, right? Like, we lost Anton Yeltsin, we lost Chekhov from the Kelvin timeline. If you wait too long, you could lose somebody, and this series, I think a Section 31 series can work on its own merits, but it's definitely going to be, must-see TV, because fucking Michelle Yeoh, Michelle fucking Yeoh is the lead character, right? Yeah, so don't wait too long on this, folks. Like get filming this. But either way, I'm really excited for it. I don't buy the arguments that you can't do a show like this where the bad guy is, kind of the centerpiece, and it's a bad guy taking on bad guys, or a bad guy taking on heroes. Like, I just don't believe you. So, and there's plenty of cases where it absolutely has worked. Just people don't like to think about that for whatever dumbass fucking reason. I love villain-led shit. So, anyway, something that's not villain-led, but might be villainous in the bad sense. The Section 31 show, again, we might not be able to talk about that for a couple of years now, but regardless, I'm excited for it. But something that might be villainous is that it looks like, or it sounds like, and as the story progressed, it seemed more and more certain. But Star Trek IV, which was supposed to be directed by S.J. Clarkson, was going to have Chris Hemsworth return as George Kirk, and of course was going to have the Kelvin Timeline crew, Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Carl Urban, and all the rest. This movie is effectively dead. S.J. Clarkson, who she was going to be the first female director for a Star Trek film, very exciting thing. She has apparently taken a job with directing parts of the Game of Thrones prequel, I think. And so she's off doing that. And because she's off doing that, and because there was never any real resolution between the pay for Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth, it would appear that this is dead in space. No pun intended, or maybe I was intended, but it's dead. And that's a shame. That doesn't mean now other people have come out. Was it John Cho or whoever who played Sulu? He has come out and said that the Quentin Tarantino Star Trek production is probably still on. So it sounds kind of like Star Trek 4 might end up being the Tarantino film instead of the S.J. Clarkson film. But it does appear that Star Trek 4 is dead. What a shame. What a shame, especially since you're going to have a Picard show coming out this year or next that would directly tie in with, events that were first portrayed in a Kelvin timeline film and that created the Kelvin timeline itself. What a damn shame. This would have been such a cool. Like, one thing I hope, we were just talking about a Section 31 show. You at some point, I know there's people thinking about this, doing a mirror universe show, okay, with Star Trek, on CBS All Access. At some point, that's got to happen, and they're going to make it happen. I know it. I can smell it, that you smell it, The Rock's cooking, I smell it, and that's what's going to be happening. Hell, The Rock might even be in it. I mean, he's Star Trek alumni. Oh, you forgot he was in Voyager, didn't you? Yeah, so it was The Big Show. Anyway, and because of that, okay, with that in mind, I think one of the ways you could have really had, kept from what Kurtzman was talking about, where he feels like everything feels the same, is have Star Treks in multiple universes. Now, you could say that would be very confusing for a lot of people, but I think we need to go back to some early quotes from Gene Roddenberry. They weren't early; they were actually later on in his life. And Gene Roddenberry made it very clear. His opinion is that his idea behind Star Trek wasn't even wagon train to the stars. Okay, his idea with Star Trek was the person on the other side of the television screen is not an idiot. And I think it would behoove Alex Kurtzman and CBS to not treat the Star Trek audience, even the new potential Star Trek audience, like idiots. Okay, because they're not. And I mean, there's certainly plenty that are, but you get my point. Okay, so let people don't immediately worry that people are going to be fucking confused as shit. That, well, wait a second. So is this? But I saw this happen on Discovery, but then this event seems to contradict that, and because it's in another universe, but the person can't grasp that it's in another universe. I think we're going to learn a very powerful lesson with in entertainment, a game-changing lesson with The Mandalorian for Star Wars, the TV show that's going to be on Disney Plus, running pretty much at the same time or available at the same time as when a new Star Wars movie comes out. I really think that that's going to teach everybody a lesson that you can do complex, multi-threaded presentations of a franchise, where you don't have to it's animated, so they clearly know that's not the movie. But where, you can really have all this stuff kind of running at the same time. And Star Trek already proved that you could kind of do that. Now, granted, that was all in the same universe, but I think you could get away with doing alternate universe shows. And I'm really, really excited for that. Even if you just want to lower the budget on it a little bit, go ahead. I don't know. Anyway, so Star Trek 4 seems to be dead, but the Tarantino film still seems to be on. We'll see what ends up happening. But bottom line, Star Trek, even with that happening, Star Trek still seems as healthy as ever, maybe even almost at its healthiest. I mean, there's a lot of hype around this machine, and I think a lot of it's well-founded when you have names like Patrick Stewart and Michelle Yeoh behind you, with you. And yeah, so Star Trek 4, okay. There it is. It's a shame. I do like the Kelvin timeline. I like those movies. I like Chris Pine. I like Zachary Quinto. I think Carl Urban's fucking amazing as McCoy, like literally amazing. It's a pity that this is going down. So, but again, like I said, otherwise, I think Star Trek's doing great. And that's really the overall thought that I want to leave you with, is that Star Trek is doing phenomenal. That said, What We Leave Behind, the Deep Space Nine documentary, still has not shipped. I've had it pre-ordered for a long time, and the Blu-ray is still delayed. It's been shown, certain aspects of it have been shown at conventions. It was supposed to definitely, the statement being said by like Ira Stephen Burr and others was that, oh yeah, it'll definitely be out end of 2018. Well, we're getting fairly into 2019 and no sign of it. So as soon as that does come out, of course, I'll do a review. I'm very excited for it. But again, even though Star Trek 4 is dead, we haven't gotten our documentary in the mail yet. I'm still feeling amazing about Star Trek overall, and I hope everyone else is as well. If you haven't checked out Discovery yet, here's your chance. If you thought season 1 was a little rough, let me tell you, try out season 2, even just the first couple episodes, and I think it might change your mind that, wow, we've actually got a show on our hands here. Even though I enjoyed season 1 overall. But anyway, so do check that out. And of course, next month we will do more reviews of the episodes that will be released. And there's a lot of comic series that are coming to conclusion, including the Star Trek versus Transformers comic book that I've been enjoying quite a bit. The further mirror adventures of the Next Generation, Mirror Universe Adventures, that being the series running Terra Incognita, should be over by then. And yeah, just a lot to talk about next month. So I will see you then, and I will see all of you on the other side.